I never thought the person I trusted most in my family would be the one to try to destroy my happiness. My cousin, the person who knew all my secrets, who had been my confidant since childhood, was now my greatest enemy. At first, I didn't see it. If someone had warned me, I would have laughed it off. But looking back, the signs were there, staring me in the face. And now, as I replay everything in my mind, I can't help but wonder how I missed it. How could someone so close, someone who smiled at me as if they wanted the best for me, be plotting my downfall? When I got engaged, it felt like the happiest moment of my life. My fiancé and I had worked so hard to reach this point, and I was excited to celebrate this milestone with the people I loved. My cousin was the first person I called. She squealed with joy, told me how happy she was for me, and immediately offered to help with the planning. She was there for everything, helping me pick the dress, organizing family meetings, and even double-checking the guest list. I thought she was just excited for me. But now, I can see her excitement wasn't for my happiness, it was for the chaos she was about to unleash. It started with little things. At first, they seemed like honest mistakes, mixing up dates with vendors, accidentally sending the wrong RSVP list to the caterer. I brushed it off. Planning an engagement party is stressful, and I thought she was just overwhelmed. She's doing so much for me, I told myself, grateful to have her support. But then, the mistakes started to pile up. Dresses didn't arrive on time, venues called about cancellations I hadn't made, and family members began calling with questions about things I hadn't even planned. It felt strange, but I didn't want to believe my cousin could be behind it. She was family, after all. Why would she hurt me? It was my fiancé who first noticed something was off. One night, as we went over the final details for the engagement party, he hesitated before saying, "Why is your cousin so involved? Doesn't it feel too much?" I laughed and defended her, brushing it off. "She's just excited for us," I said. But deep down, his words planted a seed of doubt. Was I ignoring something? Was I being blind because I didn't want to face the truth? The final blow came during the engagement rehearsal. As I walked into the hall, everything looked perfect on the surface, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't explain. My cousin greeted me with her usual warm smile, but this time, it felt off. The way she looked at me, her words dripping with sweetness, felt hollow, like a mask hiding something darker. And then, I overheard something she whispered to one of our relatives when she thought I wasn't listening. My stomach turned as I pieced it together, and for the first time, I realized my cousin wasn't just helping me. She was sabotaging. As the evening wore on, my heart raced with questions. Why would she do this? What was her motive? And most importantly, how far was she willing to go? That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment, every mistake, and every whispered word, realizing that the person I thought was my closest ally might be the one trying to tear me apart. The day after the rehearsal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My cousin's behavior had been nagging at me, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. But I still wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. Instead, I decided to pay closer attention, hoping to catch something that would confirm my suspicion. Little did I know, I wouldn't have to wait long. The first red flag came when I spoke to the florist about the arrangements. "Oh, your cousin told us the theme changed," the florist said casually, as if this was normal. My jaw tightened. I hadn't changed anything, and I certainly hadn't asked her to. "What theme?" I asked, my voice trembling. The florist hesitated, sensing my unease, before describing a color scheme that clashed horribly with everything I'd planned. I thanked her and ended the call, my heart pounding. Why would she do that? What was she trying to accomplish? As the days went on, more discrepancies started to surface. A caterer emailed me, confirming a menu I hadn't approved. The seating chart I'd painstakingly arranged was mysteriously altered. Family members began calling, confused about last-minute changes I knew nothing about. It was as if someone was deliberately unraveling every detail I had worked so hard to perfect. And in every instance, one name kept coming up: my cousin. I tried to convince myself it was all a misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew better. She wasn't just making innocent mistakes, this was intentional. Still, I couldn't bring myself to confront her, not without proof. So, I started digging. I reached out to vendors, family members, anyone who had interacted with her, and the pattern became clear. She had been spreading lies, twisting facts, and painting me as someone difficult and indecisive. And the worst part? She was doing it so subtly, so carefully, that no one suspected a thing. My fiancé grew increasingly frustrated. "Why are you letting this happen?" he asked one night, his voice tense. She's ruining everything, and you're just letting her. I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand, but he was right. I had been letting her get away with it, and it was time to put an end to it. But how? I couldn't just accuse her without solid evidence and not when she had been so good at covering her tracks. The breaking point came during a family dinner a week before the engagement. I was seated across from her, watching as she charmed everyone with her usual grace and ease. She laughed, smiled, and acted as though nothing was wrong, but then, she slipped. In the middle of a conversation, she made a passing comment to my aunt about how stressful I had been lately. "I'm just doing my best to keep things on track," she said, her tone dripping with false humility. My aunt nodded sympathetically, casting me a concerned glance. I clenched my fists under the table, rage bubbling inside me. How dare she paint me as the villain while pretending to be the hero? That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had worked for. If she wanted to play games, I was ready. But this time, I was going to play smart. I didn't just want to stop her, I wanted to expose her for who she really was. And I had a feeling her darkest secret, the one she thought she had buried, was about to come to light. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. Every conversation, every interaction with my cousin, was a game of cat and mouse. She continued her charade, acting sweet and supportive in public, while subtly undermining me behind the scenes. But I wasn't just watching anymore, I was gathering proof. Every text, every call, every little detail I uncovered was another piece of the puzzle. And slowly, the picture started to come together. It was during one of these late-night investigations that I stumbled upon either darkest secret. I had been scrolling through old photos and messages, trying to find anything that could explain her behavior, when I found a thread of conversations between her and someone I didn't recognize. At first, it seemed harmless, just casual chats, but as I read on, my stomach turned. It wasn't just some stranger. It was someone connected to her past, someone who knew things she had worked hard to keep hidden. The messages were cryptic but revealing enough to piece together the truth. Years ago, before any of this engagement drama began, she had been involved in something that could ruin her reputation, a scandal she had buried with lies and manipulation. And now, she was terrified that my engagement, with its gathering of family and friends, might somehow expose her. That's why she was trying to sabotage everything. It wasn't about jealousy or bitterness. It was about survival. Armed with this new knowledge, I knew it was time to confront her. But I couldn't just walk up to her and accuse her outright. She was too good at twisting the narrative, too skilled at turning things around to make herself the victim. I needed to catch her off guard, to expose her in a way that left no room for denial. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My fiancé and I had invited close family over to finalize the engagement details. My cousin, of course, had made herself an essential part of the planning team. As everyone gathered in the living room, I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it. It was now or never. I stood up, my heart pounding, and looked directly at her. "There's something I need to address," I said, my voice steady but firm. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. My cousin's smile faltered for just a moment before she regained her composure. "Of course," she said sweetly. "What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "I know what you've been doing," I said. My gaze locked on hers. Her expression didn't change, but I saw the slightest flicker of fear in her eyes. "The lies, the sabotage, the way you've been trying to undermine my engagement, it's all been very calculated." A murmur rippled through the room, as family members exchanged confused glances. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice dripping with innocence. But I wasn't going to let her play the victim this time. I pulled out my phone, opening the messages I had found. "Really?" I said, holding up the screen. "Because these conversations tell a very different story." Her face turned pale as she realized what I was showing. The room erupted with questions and gasps as I began reading out the messages, carefully choosing the ones that painted the clearest picture. My cousin tried to interrupt, to defend herself, but her words stumbled over each other, falling flat under the weight of the evidence. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Everyone was staring at her, their expressions a mix of shock and disappointment. My cousin, for once, had no words. She sat there, her mask of sweetness shattered, unable to deny what was now out in the open. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time, the truth was on my side, and she had no way to twist it. But this wasn't just about exposing her lies, it was about reclaiming my voice, my story. And as I stood there, surrounded by my family, I knew this was only the beginning of her reckoning. The silence in the room was deafening. My cousin sat frozen, her face pale, her lips trembling as she tried to piece together a response. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered everything she had done. The lies, the sabotage, the sleepless nights I had spent questioning my own sanity. No, she didn't deserve my pity. She deserved to face the truth. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, family members demanding explanations, some expressing shock, others outright disbelief. My cousin stammered, her hands shaking as she tried to explain herself. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, her voice barely audible over the commotion. "I wasn't trying to ruin anything, I was just trying to help." But her words carried no weight. The evidence I had presented spoke louder than any excuse she could muster. My fiancé, who had been silent until now, finally stood up. His expression was calm but resolute as he turned to face her. "Why?" he asked, his voice cutting through the noise. "Why would you do this? What did you gain from hurting us?" His words hung in the air, a question that no one dared to answer, not even her. My cousin's mask of composure finally cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked around the room, realizing there was no way out. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I didn't want my past to come out. I thought if I could disrupt things, make you all too distracted to notice, maybe I could keep it hidden." Her confession sent another wave of murmurs through the room. She wasn't denying it anymore. She was admitting to everything. I took a step closer, my voice steady as I addressed her directly. "You weren't just trying to protect yourself, I said. You were willing to destroy my happiness, my future, to keep your secret safe. Did you even think about what you were doing to me? To us?" My voice cracked slightly, but I refused to let the emotion take over. This wasn't about me anymore, it was about holding her accountable. Her tears fell freely now, her head bowed as she tried to hide her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the words felt hard. It was too late for apologies, and everyone in the room knew. My family looked at her with disappointment, some shaking their heads, others refusing to meet her gaze. She had betrayed not just me, but all of us. As I stood there, I realized this was the moment I had been waiting for, not to see her broken, but to reclaim my peace. "Sorry isn't enough," I said, my voice firm. "You don't get to destroy people's lives and walk away with an apology. If you want forgiveness, you have to earn. But right now, I need to focus on my engagement, on the future you tried to take from me." With that, I turned to my fiancé, who reached for my hand, his grip reassuring. "We'll get through this," he said softly, his words like a balm to my frayed nerve. And in that moment, I knew he was right. We had faced the storm together, and we had come out strong. The family gathering ended soon after, but the echoes of what had happened lingered in the air. My cousin left quietly, avoiding eye contact with anyone, her shoulders slumped under the weight of her guilt. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. The truth was out, and she had to live with it now. That night, as I sat with my fiancé, reflecting on everything that had happened, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. The burden of her lies was gone, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to let anyone take my happiness away from me again. The days that followed were a mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt lighter, as if a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The truth was out, and my cousin's lies no longer hung over me. On the other hand, there was an achy, lingering sadness that someone I had trusted so deeply had betrayed me so completely. It wasn't just about the engagement anymore. It was about the damage done to the bond we once shared. My family was in turmoil. Some rallied behind me, apologizing for not noticing the signs sooner or for ever believing her lies. Others were more hesitant, unsure how to process the revelation. And then there was my cousin. She stayed silent, avoiding any interaction with me or anyone else. I didn't hear from her, and honestly, I didn't want to. The bridge between us wasn't just burnt, it was ashes now, scattered in the wind. Meanwhile, my fiancé and I began picking up the pieces. "We're stronger than this," he told me one evening as we sat together, finalizing the last few details for the engagement. She tried to tear us apart, but here we are, standing together. His words were a reminder of why I had chosen him in the first place: his loyalty, his unwavering support. Despite everything that had happened, we were still moving forward, hand in hand. The engagement party came sooner than I expected, and with it came the nerves. Would people whisper about what had happened? Would her absence cast a shadow over the event? But as I stood there, surrounded by friends and family who truly cared, I realized none of that mattered. This day wasn't about her, it was about us, about celebrating the love we had built together. As I looked around the room, I saw smiles, laughter, and joy, everything I had hoped for. My fiancé stood by my side, his hand in mine. And in that moment, I knew we had won. Her attempts to ruin this had failed. Our love, our bond, had withstood the storm. Toward the end of the evening, my mother pulled me aside. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You handled this with strength and grace. Not many people could have done what you did." Her words brought tears to my eyes, not just because of the validation but because they reminded me of how far I had come. I wasn't just the woman who had been betrayed. I was the woman who had risen above. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing. My cousin's absence from my life no longer felt like a loss, it felt like peace. I surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared, people who wanted to see me happy. And as my fiancé and I began planning our wedding, I realized that this experience, as painful as it had been, had taught me something invaluable. It taught me the importance of trusting myself, of listening to my instincts when something feels wrong. It taught me that not everyone who smiles at you has your best interests at heart. But most importantly, it taught me that true love, whether it's from a partner, family, or friends, is unshakable in the face of adversity. As I stood in our new home one evening, looking out at the horizon, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. My cousin's betrayal had been a storm in my life, but it had passed. And in its wake, I had found clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. This was my story now. Not one of betrayal, but one of resilience. And as I looked forward to the future, I knew that no matter what came my way, I had the strength to face it head on. The weeks turned into months, and life slowly found its rhythm again. The engagement party was a beautiful memory now, a testament to love's ability to endure even the darkest storm. My cousin's absence from my life felt strange at first, but over time, it became a relief. Without her presence, the tension that had lingered for so long finally dissipated, leaving room for healing and growth. My fiancé and I began planning our wedding with renewed enthusiasm. Every decision felt like a step forward, a way to reclaim the happiness that had nearly been stolen from us. But amidst the excitement, there were moments of quiet reflection. Late at night, as we talked about the future, we often circled back to the lessons we had learned. "It's funny," he said one evening, his hand resting on mine. "She thought she could break us. But all she did was make us strong." His words resonated deeply, reminding me of how far we had come. Meanwhile, my family was adjusting to the aftermath of the confrontation. Some members reached out to my cousin, offering support and forgiveness, while others distanced themselves, unsure of how to navigate the situation. I chose to let it be. I didn't wish her harm, but I also knew that rebuilding our relationship wasn't something I wanted or needed. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. In the quiet moments, I reflected on how much I had grown. The betrayal had been painful, yes, but it had also been transformative. I was no longer the same person who had been blindsided by her lies. I had learned to trust my instincts, to stand up for myself, and to prioritize the people who truly cared about me. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was one that had made me stronger, more resilient, and more certain of who I was. The day of our wedding arrived, a bright and beautiful morning filled with hope and joy. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my dress, I couldn't help but think of everything that had led me to this moment. The challenges, the heartbreak, the revelations, they had all shaped me into the person I was now. And as I walked down the aisle, surrounded by the love of my friends and family, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. My cousin wasn't there, and that was okay. Her absence didn't diminish the day's significance. If anything, it made it more meaningful. This was my moment, a celebration of love, resilience, and the strength to overcome anything. As my fiancé took my hand and we exchanged vows, I knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, free from the shadows of betrayal and filled with endless possibilities. The reception was filled with laughter and joy, the air buzzing with energy as our loved ones celebrated alongside us. My heart swelled with gratitude as I looked around the room, realizing just how much support and love I had in my life. The pain of the past no longer lingered. It had been replaced by hope, by healing, and by the unshakable bond my fiancé and I had forged. As the night came to an end, I found myself standing under the stars, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about my cousin not with anger, but with a sense of closure. She had tried to break me, to take away my happiness, but in the end, all she had done was teach me the importance of standing tall in the face of adversity. I wished her peace, but I knew that her journey was hers to take. Mine was just beginning. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the start of something beautiful. I had faced betrayal, heartache, and challenges I never thought I could overcome, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined to live a life filled with love and joy. And as I stood there, hand in hand with the person I loved most, I knew that the future was bright, not because it was perfect, but because I had the strength to embrace it fully.